Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we read letters from the voyages of St. Frances Cabrini as she traveled around the Western Hemisphere sharing the good news of Christ. Welcome, Catholic pilgrims, to Season 5. This season, we are going to be journeying with St. Frances Cabrini. She's the first missionary that we've read here on the podcast, so I think this season is going to have a very different flavor, which is good. We need to see and learn from saints that were doing different things and living vocations and callings that might be different than what we're living. So, how was it that I settled on Mother Cabrini? In February of 2024, the movie Cabrini came out. I was initially wanting to see it, but then I couldn't find a babysitter for my son, and time just got away from me. I'd heard mixed reviews about it. People were either loving it or hating it, which is pretty par for the course. I wanted to make my own conclusions, but I just never got around to seeing the movie. Then, in April of 2024, a man named Michael, who works for Catholic Treehouse, reached out to me and shared with me that once upon a time, there was a book that contained letters from Mother Cabrini to her daughters, meaning religious sisters, as she traveled around the Western Hemisphere. He had come across an online copy of the book, and when he scoured the internet to find a used copy, he couldn't find one, and discovered that the book was out of print. He set about the task of putting the letters back into print. To hear it in his words, I'll read the editor's note now, found at the beginning of the book. When I first ran across the letters of St. Frances Cabrini, I was immediately struck by them and captivated by their charm, eloquence, and the way she captured the moments of her travels with such vivid detail. Her letters breathe with the life of a tireless voyager, describing what it was like to travel by sea, train, and donkey around the turn of the 20th century. Her words paint shimmering seascapes and landscapes and recount anecdotes that range from humorous to heartwarming to harrowing. Woven throughout, one also finds radiant depictions of her faith life, her love for the Eucharist, her devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and her passionate zeal for the salvation of every soul. Indeed, these letters are a window into the heart and soul of a missionary saint. I tried to find a print copy of the book, but even the used booksellers had nothing. I felt that Mother Cabrini's letters were too amazing to be so inaccessible, and so I began work on re-typesetting them from the original. The work you hold in your hands is the result of that effort. Every attempt was made to keep the language of the original translation intact. In a few instances, the spelling has been modernized and the punctuation set in modern style, but otherwise the text is identical to the original translation. Several of the letters are incomplete and are noted as such. Most of Mother Cabrini's letters included herein were sent to the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart, the order she founded, to whom she affectionately called her dear daughters. The others were sent to the students at the Teachers' College in Rome. When you read her letters and see her relationship with the sisters, you will see clearly that the title Mother is appropriate when referring to this amazing woman of faith. Now, let us begin our journeys with Mother Cabrini. In Corde Jesus, Michael A. Lamort, editor. In his email to me, Michael said, "If you have seen the movie, I'll tell you that the portrayal of Mother Cabrini was wholly inaccurate. In real life, she was positive, cheerful, and had supreme faith and reliance in God and in the Sacred Heart of Jesus." This piqued my interest. Did the movie get her personality wrong, or maybe they were off just a bit? Michael sent me the book, and when I browsed through it, I was intrigued to read her words. This isn't high theological teaching. It's not mystical insights. It's just a religious mother writing to her religious daughters as she travels around setting up orphanages and hospitals all over the place. Letters always give you great insight into a person's personality because they are usually very raw and real thoughts. Because of the movie, Mother Cabrini had received a bit of the limelight, and so I thought it would be good to read her for season 5. So that's how I came to pick her. But who was she exactly? Taking from the foreword on page 3, it says, Francis Xavier Cabrini was born at St. Angelo de' Lodi, Lombardy, Italy on July 15th, 1850, the youngest of a family of 13 children. Even as a child, she learned to love prayer, following the splendid example of her parents, her brothers, and sisters. At the age of 7, she was confirmed, and at 10, received her first Holy Communion. Francis, who possessed a ready intelligence and an unselfish disposition, was fired with enthusiasm upon reading the annals of the Society for the Propagation of the Faith. Although she was but a child, the missionary ideal was beginning to fasten itself in her heart, only half understood perhaps, but nonetheless real. In her child's play, she would gather violets and, placing them in tiny paper boats, send them away on the waters of the country brooks, dreaming the while of herself making long voyages to distant lands to carry on the work of converting pagans. When she was 13, she revealed her desire to her sister Rose, 15 years older than she. "You who are so small and not yet educated dare to dream of becoming a missionary?" was the comment she received. But Frances kept her radiant dream in her heart and waited patiently. In the meantime, she continued her studies and at the age of 18 obtained her teacher's certificate. A year later, her parents died. So then we all know that Mother Cabrini obviously became a religious sister. She became a mother of an order, but she longed to be a missionary in China. Yet, after an audience with the Pope, she was sent to the West, specifically New York. Reading from the book on page 5, it says, She landed in America on March 31st, 1889. Immediately, there were difficulties, but she was able to overcome them by her spirit of faith and fortitude in the knowledge that she was fulfilling the mission entrusted to her by the Vicar of Jesus Christ. The condition of the Italian immigrants, socially, economically, and religiously, was then very poor. The work of an apostle was urgently needed among them to help them combat the constant danger of loss of faith. Mother Cabrini began and extended her work for them with an energy that at times seemed rash. Taking for herself the motto of the apostle, Omnia possum in ioque me confortat, I can do all things in him who strengtheneth me. She opened schools, colleges, kindergartens, hospitals, and free clinics in New York, New Orleans, Chicago, Seattle, Denver, and Philadelphia. She did not confine her work to the United States, but extended it into Nicaragua, South America, Spain, France, and England. Her program was to follow the multitudes of Italians who had gone abroad from their native land, to keep alive and renew the faith of the adults and to care for the new generations. Unsparingly, she undertook long and repeated journeys with the daring of a fearless explorer. Her health, never strong, had become worse, and often she burned with a fever for months at a time. Yet she went without hesitation to whatever place offered a new field for the charity of herself and her sisters. So the woman, even though she was often sick, was unstoppable. And that's what always impressed me about her when I first started learning about Mother Cabrini. She did more than seems possible in a lifetime. Reading from page 7 of the foreword, it says, After 1912, Mother Cabrini spent 5 consecutive years in the United States. That is, until the day of her death, which occurred in Chicago on December 22nd, 1917. Her body now rests in New York beneath the high altar of the chapel of the Mother Cabrini High School, 701 Fort Washington Avenue, and large numbers of the faithful go there to venerate Blessed Francis Xavier Cabrini and to ask for blessings and grace. In her lifetime, she founded 67 institutions, and crossed the Atlantic 30 times. Now we have to remember, this was at the turn of the century. This was not an easy time to travel. Unfortunately, she died of malaria in one of her founded hospitals in Chicago. She was canonized in 1946, and she is the patron saint of immigrants. And her feast day is November 13th. So, with that background on her, how will this year work on this podcast? This book is very different than the others that we've read because it is a compilation of letters from her voyages. And if you look at the book, you will see 17 sections of her letters. I will group the episodes by those 17 sections. The first section is her second voyage to New York in April of 1890. There are 12 writings for that voyage. For 12 days, I will drop an episode for each of the 12 writings. So, for example, the first reading will begin this February 3rd, 2025, and I will release the writings for Friday, April 18th, 1890. The next day, I will release the writings titled Arrival in Paris, and this will continue until the 12 writings are covered. Then, I will pause for roughly a week, give you all time to catch up, and then on a Monday, I will release the next set of voyage writings. I hope this makes sense. I encourage you to download the reading list that I created so that you can find it more clearly. I'll link it in the show notes. And if you struggle to find it, just email me and I will send it your way. My email is amy@catholicpilgrim.net. At the end of each voyage, I will then give you my thoughts on what she has written about during that voyage. So you won't get a reflection every day. Now, the reason I decided to do this is because I think my reflections would break up the flow of her entire thoughts on that particular voyage. I think we need to hear it all in its entirety, and then I can reflect on what we've read. More than anything, I want you to get the flow of her thoughts on each particular voyage. So, that is how the season will work. It's a little different, but I think it will help us to get the most out of her letters. I won't be reading the preface, the entire foreword, or the entire introduction, but I encourage you to do so in your own time. Now, at the beginning of this episode, I said that I hadn't seen the movie Cabrini when it came out, but I have since seen it, and I promised on social media that I would share my review and thoughts. I can only go so far because I haven't yet read through the whole book, so I can't compare how she's depicted in the movie with how she writes in the book. So that will probably have to come at the end of this season. But as far as the movie goes, the acting is excellent. The appeal of the cinematography is extremely well done. The movement of the plot is good, keeps you interested. The movie centers on just her first trip to America and her work as soon as she lands. So you don't get the whole scope of how much she did in her lifetime, though at the end of the movie, the story does a good job of sharing with you all that she did and the impact of her life. If I have any criticisms, it's that Mother Cabrini is shown as a bit grim, though she was dealing with some extremely difficult situations and massive frustrations. And I get that you can't always be sunshine and rainbows. However, as Michael, the guy who put the book together, mentioned, the movie doesn't show her joyful and cheerful disposition. So I'm curious to see the difference in how she is portrayed in the movie as compared to hearing her own words. I'd also criticize the downplay of her reliance on God. There's a line in the movie where she tells her fellow religious sisters, quote, "We must trust in ourselves," unquote. I think it would have been more appropriate to have her say, "We must trust in Christ." I get why the movie didn't show her constantly praying, and that's mostly because it just doesn't make for good plot movement or cinema. You can't just show a person constantly in silent prayer in a movie or your audience will get bored. I think the director was hoping that you'd assume that because she was a devout Catholic and a religious, that she would spend a lot of time in prayer. Now, I also know that some people were critical of the quote-unquote girl boss theme that kind of runs throughout. That didn't bother me too much, and normally it would. However, she was working at a time when it actually was difficult for women to be heard and taken seriously. She was trying to navigate the politics and climate of the time when women didn't really have much of a voice. So I think showing the difficulty of that is appropriate and realistic. And something we need to be very careful of is always having a knee-jerk reaction to anything that possibly hints of liberalism. Is it a bit girl bossy? Yes. Did they need to add it in to make her inspirational? No. Does it completely ruin the movie? No, it doesn't. All in all, I thought the movie was very good. It wasn't a cheesy, simplistic Christian movie. It had meat to it and depth of character. It was well produced and definitely doesn't come off as a Hallmark movie, which I appreciate. We need more high quality Christian/Catholic movies, and I would recommend seeing this, if for nothing more than to compare it to what we are about to read from her. I think it will give us a good comparison. So, with all that said, I'm ready to go. The first voyage will drop on Monday, and from there, we will accompany Mother Cabrini on her journeys around the Western Hemisphere. Thank you for listening in, and I'll see you on Mother Cabrini's second voyage to New York. Until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.